stand our ground. We know you're trying to open the gates of hell, but we won't back down. So yes, we'll stand our ground. We won't be pushed around. We must keep you from putting our kids in the ground, so we can't stand down. No, we won't back down. We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't stand down, brother. So we'll stand our ground. And no, we won't back down. 'Cause we know what's right. And we got plenty of fight. And if you think you're gonna keep pushing us around, well, you'll lose that crown. 'Cause we won't back down. We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. We've got to stand our ground. And no, we won't back down. You know, it's pretty clear. If these lunatics think they have the right to strip us of our rights of self-defense, and if they're willing to do that, what else are they willing to do? We won't back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. No, we won't back down. Back down, baby. There ain't no easy way out. We can't back down, brother. We've got to stand our ground, so we won't back down. No, we won't back down. Virginians, you won't fight this fight alone.
Still connected?
All right. Hello, everybody. I just lost Philip. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Let's look at the comments.
Hey Pat, I'm trying a different device. I don't know if you have to let me in with the other device or what the deal is.
Okay. All right, Philip, are you with us? I don't show you on the screen. Let me refresh here. Okay, I am showing. Oh, geez. All right. I can see Dan. I can see me.
How
I can't see Philip.
about hear me? Am I in
I
now?
hear you fine. Beautiful. And no echo. I'm just waiting for Philip to load on here.
Okay, you can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Beautiful.
Excellent. And am I centered in frame for you?
You are. You're perfect.
Outstanding.
All right. So we just lost Philip. I think he'll be back in just a minute. Let me see what happens. So can you hear me still, Dan?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, so Philip will be back with us in a minute, I think. And hello, everybody. This is Pat Webb with VCDL, and we have with us Dan Abbott, who is the commander of the Campbell County Constitutional Militia. So, what exactly is a constitutional militia, Dan?
So the simplest definition, I guess, would be, we looked at the Second Amendment, and, it's the only time that the Constitution uses the word necessary. It says that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And based on that, we said, okay, well, that's an awful lot of emphasis placed by some of the finest men in history on this organization. Why? What do these look like? How do they function? What should they be? And, based on that, we're going, okay, well, in context that this was written in, what do those organizations look like? And we came up with three characteristics that we believed made those organizations what they were. One we pulled right out of Virginia Code Section 44-1, as well as the Second Amendment and the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act, and that's that it's the whole body of the people. It's all of the military-aged males in the country or in the community are part of it. One is that every community had one because these organizations covered down on a whole lot of stuff other than just being some kind of private army or bunch of loosely banded gunfighters. That these were community support organizations. They were men that were part of and invested in their communities and invested in making their communities better and safer. And the third characteristic was the quality of character of men that led. And, that was Patrick Henry and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Sam Adams. And again, I would argue these are some of the finest men in the history of the world. And I believe that it's absolutely imperative that we have that same caliber of men that lead these organizations. And so the simplest definition of what a constitutional militia is that it's the whole body of the people that are committed to preserving and protecting their republic and protecting their communities, and that they are led by the finest men in the communities. They're led by born leaders.
Okay, so what is it that you guys do? What does a constitutional militia look like?
Well, obviously there is a component there where we are required to be trained to arms. If you look at Virginia Code Section 44-1, it actually defines the militia as having three distinct components in the state of Virginia. One being the Virginia National Guard, one being the Virginia Defense Force, and the third being the unorganized militia, which it further defines as being the whole body of the people, males ages 16 to 55, trained to arms. So trained to arms is certainly a component of that. But, like I mentioned before, every community had one because they covered down on a whole bunch of other roles and responsibilities. We've done everything from covering down for Adopt a Highway program and picking up trash to facilitating the distribution of food through food banks. We have parked cars and managed traffic for political conventions. I mean, pretty much you name it. If it has anything to do with our community, we've done a lot of storm work. Cleaned up after disasters, tornadoes, as well as ice storms in the winter, cleared roads for ambulances and fire trucks, and basically anything that is not already taken care of in our communities, we try to plug those holes and fill those gaps. And it just it gives us an organization and a command structure that allows us to do that more seamlessly, more fluidly, and more efficiently.
So, I mean, a lot of people think of militia and they think of people going out and drilling, like military drills and things like that. So that's a small part of it or a big part of it, or?
It is definitely a part of it. We do train in that fashion, but as far as like the practical application of the organization, it's essentially none. We have yet to be put in a position where that was necessary, and I really don't think that if I look at the thrust of the Second Amendment, and I think that a lot of people who would fall what I would consider to be far to the right, that understand that the Second Amendment is not just about people with guns, that it's about a well-regulated militia. It's almost like they read that and they read it as war is necessary or violence is necessary to the security of a state. And I don't believe that's the case at all. And I don't think that's what was intended by the Second Amendment, because what it says is well-regulated militia. And what well-regulated militia does, what that word brings to the table, is it brings what I would consider to be a threat of violence. It's the same principle that Teddy Roosevelt was emphasizing when he said, walk softly and carry a big stick. I don't consider the Second Amendment to be a last resort to restrain government or to prevent foreign invasion or to suppress insurrection. In my opinion, it's a first line of defense, but that first line of defense is the threat, the fact that it exists. One of the admirals from Imperial Japan after the war, they asked him, after Pearl Harbor, you had the country on her heels, why didn't you invade the mainland? And he asked if we thought that he was stupid. We would never invade America. There would be a gun behind every blade of grass. So foreign powers understand the importance of an armed citizenry that is organized and trained and has a rank and command structure and is able to function in a fluid fashion. And I really believe that's what's intended by the Second Amendment, is that we would maintain those bodies of force, that the people, the great American experiment in self-governance, that the monopoly on force would be possessed by the people at the lowest level. And I think that's really what's intended by it, is that we would maintain these organizations, and as we maintain them, that alone would act as a restraint to government and a restraint to foreign powers, that they would think twice before they came onto our soil.
So if somebody wanted to, let's see, we have a comment here from Rights Are Not Traditions, and he says, the Fed has been causing problems to offer solutions for a long time when people could provide for and protect themselves before broad, strict regulations and a state slave industry. Homes didn't have locks. So I'm not sure how that ties in with the subject that we're talking about, but
I think where he's going with that is that we have an enormous amount of federal government overreach, which I would agree with his assessment on that. We the people are quite capable of governing ourselves. We don't need an aristocracy. We don't need royalty to rule over us and tell us what we need or what is best for us. We as Americans are quite capable of doing that on our own.
so if somebody wants to join a group like yours, constitutional militia, how would they go about finding one and doing that?
Well, there's a number of there's more than a number. There's probably 30 counties or city municipalities in the state of Virginia that already have some form or some semblance of a constitutional militia, or at the very least are moving in that direction. And I'm pretty well networked with those other organizations. But obviously, that leaves about another 100 localities that do not have an organization. And in my opinion, they should. It's not good enough for Campbell County to have a well-regulated and trained organization, and for our neighbors, Bedford and Appomattox and Amherst, to all have organizations. But really, every locality, every community should have a well-regulated militia made up of the whole body of the people. And so for those that don't have an organization in their community, I think it's time to stand one up and start one. I think you need to be working hand in hand with your local governments, with your local sheriffs and your local boards of supervisors or city councilmen, and moving in the direction of providing for the natural defense of your communities by standing up constitutional militia. And it's not a secret society. We're not built around the idea of keeping people out. The idea is that this is the whole body of the people. And so, yeah, we should be having public musters. I'm not I mean, you know, I'm on your podcast or your Zoom call here. I'm not trying to hide from the government. We're not doing anything that could even be considered to be illegal, immoral, or unethical. Nor will we ever. And as long as we maintain a course of action that's legal, moral, and ethical, I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anyone to hide from. And so I believe it's very, very important that these organizations are overtly public and are married to their local government, their local sheriff's departments, their local boards, and that they're recruiting to the whole body of the people.
So Darren is asking, what is the line where kinetic action is appropriate according to your militia commander?
Well, I would be inclined to, and I believe it was John Parker that said it at Concord Green, stand your ground, do not fire unless fired upon. And that's where I would be at. You know, there's an awful lot of people who seem very, very eager to move in the direction of violence. And I work for the United States Army. I've been deployed overseas. I've seen what war-torn countries look like. And the last thing I want for America is for us to repeat America's darkest hour, our huge black eye where we spilled American blood on American soil. And so I'm going to do absolutely everything in my power to prevent any scenario from becoming a kinetic scenario. You know, like I said at the beginning of the call there, that the whole idea here is that the existence of militia, the fact that we are regulated and trained and can speak in one accord, that's what acts as a restraint to foreign powers and insurrection and government overreach. It's, you know, I don't have a line in the sand that says, oh, well, you know, this is where things are going to become kinetic, because we just, that would be, in my opinion, a foolish thing to say or to do. You know, it has to be the whole body of the people. And so for me to arbitrarily draw a line in the sand that says, well, this is where the whole body of the people is going to go kinetic, I think that's ultimately nonsense. So I can't say, oh, well, this is, I mean, I have personal lines that, you know, if you try to forcefully vaccinate my children, that's a big issue for me. But there's no point that I'm going to say, well, this is the line in the sand. This is where it becomes kinetic, because I don't believe that I have the authority to make that decision.
And Joanna is asking that she said you mentioned males or females involved as well.
Yeah, great question. The reason that I use that phrasing of males is because that's the phrasing that Virginia Code section uses. If you look at the 1903 National Defense Authorization Act, as well as the code sections for 44 of the 50 states, many of those use language that is much more ambiguous, that allows for males and females. The other thing with that language is that is a legal requirement. In the event that Governor Youngkin activated the unorganized militia for, you know, a massive natural disaster or foreign invasion or something like that, if you're a male between the ages of 16 and 55, you are required to report. But that certainly is not, it doesn't mean that anyone who is outside of those parameters can't participate. It just means that you're required if you're within those parameters. So yeah, we have a lot of female membership, and you know, we have tons of roles other than, you know, like I said, it's a community support organization. So there's a whole lot of work that needs to be done that's not necessarily gunfighting. You know, we have tons of people that don't shoot, don't use firearms, don't really have any use for them, and that's absolutely fine. They're integral parts of our organization.
Philip, have you got questions, comments, things you want to address? Can you hear me, Philip? I don't know if Philip can hear me.
It doesn't look like it. Either that
Philip,
or
can
he's
you hear me
frozen.
now? I don't think he can hear me.
Doesn't appear
Okay.
that way. Doesn't
We're
appear that way.
having technical difficulties tonight. I am so sorry.
I can probably fill the time pretty readily for those that know me. Um, and if people want to weigh in with questions, awesome. And if not, I'll go until you tell me to stop. Uh,
Okay.
so
Yeah, just go ahead.
a little bit of background on Campbell County Militia and why the organization exists and where it came from. Is you guys are intimately familiar. Uh, Early 2020 or late 2019, you had the new legislature in Virginia coming out with this move towards sweeping gun control legislation, which of course sparked you guys to get involved and amplified. Lobby Day turned that into that huge gun protest, which I'm pretty sure, and you can probably correct me, Pat, is probably the largest pro-gun protest in the history of the nation, which you guys did a fabulous job with. But in the kind of aftermath of that was this 2A sanctuary resolution movement, which swept all across the state of Virginia. You got 133 counties or city municipalities, and to date, 105 of them have passed a 2A sanctuary resolution, which is just a huge majority. And of course, you had a whole bunch of sheriffs and stuff that were coming out saying the same thing. Hey, we're not going to enforce this gun control. Don't bring it to our locality. And in response to that, one of the legislators said something to the effect of, well, if you counties or you cities think that you can defy the state, well, you can't. We will nationalize the guard and remove your elected officials. And the reaction from the people is like, well, now wait a minute. Like these are our local officials. This is our sheriff in our town. Like the state doesn't have any jurisdiction over who we want to represent us or who we want to protect us in our own communities. And the natural response to that, well, how do we prevent the government from coming here and taking our elected representatives at our local level? And Bedford County was the first one to do it, and as far as I'm aware, they are the first public militia muster since prior to the Civil War, as far as I'm aware. And they had somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 people show up to a public park and stand up and be counted for. About 2 weeks later, the same organizers did the same thing in Campbell County, which is right next door. And we ended up with probably 250 names on a roster. And about 20 people checked a box on that muster card that said interested in leadership. So we basically cold called those 20 people, and we all ended up sitting around a conference table in the library and kind of looking at each other and going, what in the world have we done? Have we made some kind of a huge mistake here? And because, really, we didn't know what this looked like or how it worked. And so we said, well, finest men in the history of the world, I would argue, said this was necessary. So, I mean, that sounds to me like a status of freedom or independence can't exist apart from this organization existing. So, what does it look like? How does it work? Let's start doing some research. Let's start doing some homework and figure out what they meant when they said well-regulated and necessary. So that's where we came to, the Virginia Code section in the 1903 National Defense Act and all of that stuff, and really started digging into it and figuring out what these organizations looked like and what the men that penned this in the 1770s meant. And that's where we came up with those three characteristics from. And as we started working through it, we realized, well, that's all true, but we also live in the 21st century. And so there's hurdles that we have to clear. So ultimately, we have built, bylaws. Our organization is a Virginia non-stock corporation, so that we're able to have a bank account and manage money and all of that. And we built a code of conduct because pretty quickly we recognized, well, as soon as we carry the word militia, which I believe that we have to in order to be constitutionally protected and legal. As opposed to being some kind of private paramilitary organization, which we are not. But in order to be that, we have to carry the word militia. But unfortunately, militia has, it's almost like a four-letter word. It's got a bad rap, and it can have a tendency to attract people that are not who we're looking for. They're not upstanding members of their community. They're not positive contributors. And so we built a code of conduct that our members are required to sign. And it basically just says, be a good person, be an upstanding citizen. And the reason that we have that is so that if you don't fit into that category, if you don't conduct yourself in that fashion, we can say, hey, look, you signed a code of conduct saying that you would you would be a positive contributor to your community and your society, and you're not doing that. So it just gives us a little bit of a mechanism of control. But we have a lot of stuff like that. That we have put a lot of time and effort into, and anyone that's interested in standing up a constitutional militia, we would be happy to provide all of that stuff, all that documentation. You're welcome to take it, tweak it, change it, use it verbatim, whatever anyone wanted to do. I have no issue with. One of the biggest problems you were asking earlier about what we do. One of our biggest goals is education, because I look at our culture as a whole, and we've just, we like to say that we have public schools, but I'm not sure that we have public schools. I think we have government indoctrination centers. I think that they're purpose built to miseducate people to protect the federal government, and you can't poll most people on the street and ask them what form of government we have in America. Almost without exception, they're going to tell you it's a democracy, and it's not. It's a constitutional republic. If you poll people, even those who are pro-Second Amendment, what does the Second Amendment say? They're going to jump right to the last portion, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, which is absolutely true. But there's a huge difference between a well-regulated militia and a mindless rabble that happens to have guns. And so education, helping people understand what form of government we have been entrusted with and how that form of government is supposed to work, what purpose it's supposed to serve, is a huge part of what we do. Even amongst politicians, you can't ask them what purpose does government in America have. They won't be able to tell you. And I know that because I've asked hundreds of them. And if we want to know what the purpose of government in America is, I would cite the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. When a government becomes destructive to these ends, it becomes the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And if we understood that government in America existed to protect individual liberty, to protect life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, we would be on a much better course on keeping government where it belongs and preventing its overreach and its overstep. Looks like we've got a question there.
So, well, it's more of a statement. Rights are not a tradition, says to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them, which is very true.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
we also do have a question. Darren is asking, how do you fund your militia's activities?
Yeah, so we're essentially 100% self-funded. We take donations. We had discussed the idea of having dues, but an organization that's the whole body of the people can't really exclude people because they didn't pay a fee. That sounds an awful lot like government overreach to me. So we don't have dues. We do accept donations, and then we sell stuff like our merchandise, our hats and our t-shirts and all of that kind of stuff, which we're using as a PR campaign to help rehabilitate the word, so that when people see us in the community participating in whatever humanitarian activities, that they associate that with militia. So yeah, we're self-funded. The vast majority of our money comes through our members.
And DLD is asking, said they're in Virginia and interested in learning more. So where would somebody go to learn more?
Sure. So Campbell County Militia has a website, which I'm happy to facilitate contacting people with whatever part of the state they're in and connecting them with patriots in that area, which is www.campbellmilitia.com. I am also happy to give out my cell phone number and my email address. My cell phone number is area code 518-338-5112. And my email address is Dan_Abbott, ABBOTT 13 @protonmail.com. And I can't promise to respond to you immediately, but I will definitely get back to you and put you in contact with people in your part of the state, or help you stand up a constitutional militia in your area if you don't already have one.
So I think I have that right. Campbell, CampbellMilitiA.com is the website.
Correct.
Okay, so I've got that up on the screen for people.
Perfect.
Philip, do you have your mic working now? Nope, can't hear you. Sorry. Okay.
Technology.
Yeah, sometimes it's like that. Uh,
If you want me to keep talking, I'm happy to keep talking, Pat.
so Virgil is saying hi from Manchester, England. Cool.
Wow, cool.
And
So,
let me just answer. The guy 61 wants to know where Ed is, our social media director. Ed passed away the end of October, beginning of November last year. So we miss him too. I wish he was here, but he's looking down on us from heaven, and I'm sure he's got a ton of selfies with God. So, um, that it is what it is. And, you know, anyway, yeah. So more about your militia there, Dan.
sure. It's interesting that we have somebody from England on here. The roots of this whole idea of citizen soldiers goes all the way back to England, which is probably a lot of people don't know or don't realize that. But prior to the creation of standing armies, which I think was in the 1600s for England, they were militia based as well. So yeah, the whole idea of the people possessing arms and being organized goes back a lot farther than the 1770s. Yeah, let's see here. What else? This whole idea of government in America was built around this idea of preservation of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But the model for constitutional republic is really a model of the lesser magistrate. The idea there being that power, which I would argue that there's really only two powers or two forces on earth. One of those, of course, is violence. Everybody pretty much knows that. You see it acted out all over the world. The other, in my opinion, is that principle that I talked about earlier. It's the idea of threat of force or threat of violence. And in the case of militia, that should be a passive threat. And when I say a passive threat, what I mean is, in the exact same way that when a law enforcement officer introduces himself or his presence to a situation, the fact that he's wearing a uniform with a badge and carrying a duty belt with a gun, he brings a passive threat of violence there. He brings authority with him into the situation. And militia is true in the exact same way. When I'm introduced to a politician or to a person at all, and somebody says, "Hey, there's somebody I'd like you to meet. This is Dan. He's the commander of the county militia." Their reaction is typically something like, "Oh, the militia," because that word still means something. I've never been introduced and had somebody say, "Oh, well, I want you to meet Dan. He's the commander of the militia. These people have guns and they're not afraid to use them." Nobody ever says that because it's not necessary, because that word militia still means something. It still carries a passive threat with it, and that's really what was the intent there. So there only being two powers, violence and threat of force or threat of violence. In our case, that's a passive threat. I believe that should reside at the local level, at the lowest level, where it's most easily accessed by and most easily influenced by the people.
Okay, and I think you can hear me now, finally.
Yes.
There we go.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
Technology.
So, and of course, I missed most of what you said, trying to dink around to get into this conversation. But I know that when you and I had a long discussion, that the bottom line was that a constitutional militia is really there to serve the people, to work interface with the government, to be somebody that could be called upon in an emergency for one thing or another, from distributing food to whatever an emergency might require of the local government. I think that's I'm kind of summarizing what I got from our conversation.
Yeah, that's exactly the whole idea, is that we are a resource to our local government, our county government, and ultimately to the state government. That when they need manpower for anything, whether it's handing out food or whether it's clearing roads or whether it's directing traffic or whatever. I feel like sometimes people think that, oh, militia, well, they're kind of like cops, they whatever. Well, that's not the case at all. We're certainly not law enforcement, and I can't do their job. But what I can do is I can lighten some of their workload. If there's a scenario where, law enforcement's a very, very limited resource as far as their manpower is concerned. And if they're tied up directing traffic because there's a political convention or there's a college graduation or there's whatever in town, and law enforcement has to be tied up to direct traffic and prevent accidents, they're then not able to do all of the rest of their job. It taxes their manpower.
Or a
And
lost
when there's
child.
exactly, or a lost child, or anything like that that's manpower intensive, and there is an opportunity there for us to fill in a non-law enforcement capacity and help
Right.
lighten some of their workload. That's exactly what we're there to do, is so that they then have freedom of maneuver to go do their job, do the
And you'll
important
find,
parts that we can't do.
in my experience with gun owners in Virginia, is that a lot of them are very much community minded like that. That would be more than willing to take the shirt off their back to help somebody else. So some very well may be interested. But I guess it's time to switch over, Pat. So,
Yeah, yeah. So, Dan, this has been very enlightening and I appreciate it. And let me put up one more time where people can find you. So it's the Campbell County Constitutional Militia, and they can be found at campbellmilitia.com. And I would assume that all of your contact information is on that page. Is that correct? Oh, we lost Dan. Okay. So next we have Eric Pratt with Gun Owners of America. Welcome, Eric.
Well, hello. It's good to be with you all. Thanks
It's
for
yeah,
having me.
it's
yeah,
great to
good to
have
see you.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, good seeing
so
you.
you guys have been doing a lot of heavy lifting here lately, haven't you?
Yeah, well, there's obviously there's a lot of lifting to be done, as you know. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of legal work, a lot of challenges in the courts, and there's things that we're pushing in Congress that we'll be having votes on in the next couple weeks. So a lot of things happening there as well.
So what's
Yep.
going on with the pistol brace case?
Sure. Well, as you know, the Biden administration issued the pistol brace regulation in January. In February, we filed in the Southern District of Texas. We filed seeking a preliminary injunction. Now, we're doing this in conjunction with Attorney General Ken Paxton. So we're very excited about that. Of course, to get, for those who know or maybe don't know, to get a preliminary injunction, basically to get a judge to halt enforcement of the law, you have to show that we're going to suffer irreparable harm if the law or the order stays in effect. Well, of course, infringement of rights does meet that threshold for suffering irreparable harm. And of course, you have to show evidence that you're likely to win your case. There's a very high threshold to get a preliminary injunction. We've been successful in other places in the country on other issues getting preliminary injunctions, and so we're very confident in this case. In fact, we're encouraged by if any of you watch Guns and Gadgets with Jared of Guns and Gadgets. I mean, he's analyzes these court cases. He said this case is extremely thorough and very well presented, so that's encouraging. I mean, if this was coming before Judge Jared, we would be doing very well. Anyway, so what we're doing, we're challenging Biden's ATF rule, which basically puts millions of gun owners in the crosshairs. Americans own up to 40 million of these pistols with stabilizing braces. They were initially invented to help, like military veterans, those who were disabled. And these stabilizing braces do exactly that. They help stabilize an otherwise heavier pistol for somebody who maybe only has use for one arm. But anyway, so there's been a lot of these that have been sold for sale. And basically what happened is for years, for up to 10 years, the ATF was giving pronouncements that these pistol brace firearms were legal. And so based on that, manufacturers were producing them, consumers were purchasing them. And so now millions of people own these for lawful reasons, including, of course, self-defense. But now the ATF on a dime, reverse course. Of course, this is very political. I mean, this is just Biden trying to, bring the dragnet and grab as many guns as he can. And so they've reclassified these as short-barreled rifles. And of course, you know what that means. That kicks in the NFA. You've got to register these. They've so graciously given us a 120-day period that we have to register these. So that's coming up at the end of the month, where that timeline is coming. And for people, just so they know, the penalties are stiff. 10 years in jail, potentially $250,000 in fines, simply because, maybe a barrel is half an inch too short or something like this. I mean, this is a lot of penalty for something that was otherwise law-abiding, owned, in a law-abiding way, and even the ATF for years said people could own. So our case is arguing, look, all legislative powers are granted to Congress, not to administrative agencies. The ATF is bypassing Congress, shredding people's rights. This violates the Second Amendment. This violates the American Procedures Act. The Administrative Procedures Act, which is basically like it's been called a constitution for administrative agencies. Go figure, like the Constitution wasn't enough.
Good
But
enough.
basically, it sets down rules for preventing this kind of thing, where administrative agencies become like a Congress and violate people's laws. But there's real time problems, and again, we've filed this suit. We are hoping that our judge issues a ruling in the next couple weeks before before this goes into effect, because there's besides the millions of people that have to either disassemble their firearm or register it or destroy their firearm. I mean, all of these are bad choices. You have people who may want to comply, but they live in a state where if their pistol now magically becomes a short-barreled rifle, they're committing a crime because their state bans short-barrel rifles. Or people in the military, if their pistol, let's say they don't register it or they're not able to register it, they've been deployed, they're now committing a felony and they could be dishonorably discharged. So there's real life implications for this. So anyway, we're looking forward, we hope, to getting a decision in the next couple of weeks. We haven't had an oral hearing. It's not uncommon in Texas for judges just to take both sides, look at the written briefs, and then make a decision on a preliminary injunction. So we'll see what happens there. If I could, Phil and Pat, just mention, that's on the legal end. I mentioned we're doing stuff in Congress as well. HJ Res 44. Call your congressman, urge them to support this. Basically, it will do, it's kind of the legislative equivalent of what we're doing in court, because Congress has so many days after an administrative agency issues a ruling. Congress has so many days to basically repeal it. Both houses, both chambers have to pass it. And in this case, this type of resolution is privileged, which means that it's not subject to the filibuster. So that means we're going to be able to force a vote in both the House and the Senate. Now, we
Did
don't
that?
think, obviously, that even if we passed it in both chambers, that it would go, that President Biden would sign it. But think about what a huge message that sends to the courts when they see that, hey, once it did get before the people's representatives, they voted it down. So
And that
anyway,
was
that's
that
coming up
was
real soon.
HJ Res 44.
Yes.
Is that the
So
one that already passed out of committee, out of the judiciary?
Correct. That's right. So it's coming up. We've been told it will be before the full House within the next 10 days at some point, and then we'll immediately go over to the Senate for a vote. So it's actually important that we also contact our senators as well. I know that that's a tough haul in
Yeah.
Virginia.
We're so lucky with our two wonderful senators.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, bless their hearts. I hear
Yeah.
Tim Kaine has put in a gun control bill that just recently.
Well,
So,
but he's all for the Second Amendment, don't you know?
oh yeah,
I
yeah.
favor the Second Amendment, but, right?
Oh, it's a
How
huge
many
butt.
times have we heard that?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's baloney. So what did you have? What else did you have cooking at this time? You, of course, GOA's been a great partner for VCDL in these lawsuits here in Virginia, going after the bans that we had in parks and so forth in Winchester, and hopefully, in fact, I think that's coming up in July. That case is actually then finally coming up to settle a couple of the other issues that are in that. And I would be wonderful to get an injunction going for the state. But, so you've been a great partner. What else is going on federally? Bump stocks.
So yeah, bump stocks has been encouraging in that some of the more recent decisions in the Fifth Circuit, so that would be the Texas, Louisiana area, and the Sixth Circuit, that would be Michigan, Indiana area. We've actually gotten a couple of victories, which means now we've got a split in the circuits. Some have said that ATF, can ban bump stocks, and then now we've got a couple of circuits that said no, that's unconstitutional. That's protected by the Second Amendment. And regardless of what we may think about, bump stocks being essential, realize the principle at stake here. If ATF can ban bump stocks, then why can't they go after pistol braces next or certain triggers next? So I mean, it's all.
Yeah, we saw that evolve thanks to Trump. Telling ATF, oh, don't worry about this, the Constitution thing. Let's just go ahead and plow forward and ban those. And oh yeah, by the way, on red flag, yeah, let's take their guns. We'll do due process later. There's no big hurry for that. Yeah, thanks to all that, we're watching this evolve, and it's wonderful that we're seeing the brakes being slammed on because we've got to do something.
And to put it in perspective, a lot of people said when the bump stock ban was taking place, they were like, well, I don't really care. A bump stock is a pretty useless thing anyway. But the same way that they banned the bump stock, they could then say, okay, 15-inch handguards are not a necessary thing, and they make it more easier for you to hold the rifle in a certain way that may be more aggressive. So we're going to ban 15-inch handguards, and all of a sudden, the millions of people that have 15-inch handguards now have to put an 8-inch handguard on their rifle. So it's a snowball thing, and it's a basic right to property. I mean, okay,
Right.
ban murder,
Yeah.
but don't ban the tool. A lot people are killed with golf clubs all the time, but I don't see any major cry to ban golf clubs.
That's right.
They've got to be stopped because they are making law. They just cannot be allowed to get away with that. It's just a shame it takes so long to fix.
One of the underlying arguments for the bump stock ban was that it increased the rate of fire. Well, think about how many other parts of a firearm can increase the rate of fire, not the least of which would be magazines. Having a 10-round magazine or a 15-round magazine certainly helps increase the rate of fire over, say, just a your ordinary, lever action rifle.
Right. Well, what about if you lighten the trigger up? Oh, well, you had a 6-ounce trigger. Now you got a 5-ounce. Oh, well, that speeds it up. One round a minute, it speeds it up, but that's a speed up.
So it was really important to fight this and defeat this in the courts. And thankfully, as I was saying, we have now a split in the circuits, which actually means that there's a possibility that the Supreme Court might take this up. And obviously, we're at a better time right now if the court were to take it up than probably, most times in our history.
Well, you'd think they'd almost have to. I know they don't have to do anything, but you'd think they'd almost have to take it up, because when you've got a split like that, now you've got two classes of citizens. The citizens in one part of the country that have certain rights that have been protected, and they can have a bump stock or they could have arm braces. And then the citizens in another part of the country, in the same country, that don't have those same rights at the federal level.
Exactly.
That's wrong. And hopefully the Supreme Court will say we got to fix a split like that, especially something like this that could get you in jail for 10 years and a $250,000 fine. That's the other thing about all this. Again, when the BATF is making law, again, this is why we don't want them doing this. They can put you in jail. They can destroy your life. All unelected power. Nobody else in the country voting for people that would agree to do this, but they're doing it. Again, it's God's work you're doing. We've got to stop this.
Absolutely. I'll mention one other thing we're involved in just real recently. Friday, we brought a lawsuit in the Northern District of Florida, of Texas. So it's a federal suit going after. If you remember, after the Uvalde tragedy, a lot of Republicans compromised and basically agreed with the Democrats. They were led by John Cornyn of Texas. And so a lot of gun control got agreed to. One of the items was what amounts to a waiting period for young adults who are purchasing firearms. And so, here you have young adults who can go to war, die for their country, get married, have children, and yet here they're going to have to go through a waiting period before they can purchase a firearm. Well, John Cornyn and Joe Biden said yes. We at GOA said no. And so that's what we're challenging. And here again is a very important, not only is it an infringement and worthy of fighting, but there's also a principle that's at stake, because if they can draw the line at 21, then they can draw that line somewhere else. And in fact, it's interesting that there's already been a bill introduced now to raise the age to purchasing any semi-automatic firearm to 25. And so you see where this is going. Once you allow a principle to stand, then you've just conceded ground that now that becomes the next starting point for the next battle. And so
you have to understand,
got to beat this back.
Yeah, and you got to understand, the people that are doing this are not nice people. They're not doing this for the country. They've got a different agenda, and they're going to nibble away and rip away until there's nothing left. A bite here, a bite there, and if we're apathetic, then they're going to go ahead and take the whole enchilada. But this is not to make us safer. This is to disarm us. That's the ultimate goal of this. Nobody's doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. And again, we cannot let those people win, because we're the last shining light on the hill in the world, as I see it. We cannot let freedom die here, or it is truly over for everybody. At least as long as we're around, there is that reminder to the world that freedom's out there. You just have to fight for it, to seek it.
Yeah, I was reading one of the comments there saying that Supreme Court West Virginia versus EPA case should have ended all this. And it's true. That case basically said that an agency like the EPA, isn't a legislative body and, can't act like the Congress and go beyond its authority. There's another case like that involving what's known as Chevron. that's coming before the Supreme Court. And it does get frustrating that it's like these cases come down, we win them, and there's a little movement. Well, kind of like the Bruin decision. I mean, that's actually benefited us in many, many ways. A lot of gun control has been repealed as a result, but there's still several states that are holding out, Illinois, California, New York, that are just digging in their heels and saying, no, we're not going to submit yet. And so we just got to stay vigilant and we keep fighting and until they fall into line.
Right. We just don't give up.
Even
That's
if
right.
all of those other states did fall into line, you can never, ever, ever let your guard down, because
No.
there's always going to be somebody waiting in the wings for that moment of weakness to jump in and take your rights away.
It's never, like I say, it never ends. The goal is to disarm us, and the people that want to do it will never give up. And for that reason, we have to stand guard. Our borders need to be sealed, and those people are not allowed in where the Second Amendment is. They're not going to take it away from us. But boy, it's a shame. I just wish people could live and let live. Let's not try to live everybody else's life and tell them how to live their life. But there are people that love to do that. They love to control, and there's people that want to make get our government knocked down so that they can have their little one world order. No, thank you.
Yeah, I wish we at GOA could work ourselves out of a job where we have just smashed the opposition, they fall into line, and then we can go into other lines of work. But, I'm getting to an age where that may not happen in my lifetime, maybe in my children's lifetime, but, we just got to stay ever vigilant because, the left does not want us to be able to protect ourselves. And, so we're seeing all these bans and, punishing people who use guns in self-defense, but throwing the criminals back out on the street. There's a lot of work to be done.
Interesting, there's an article about this. Basically, what they're saying is it's interesting that the same side that's pushing all this gun control at the same time is making everything turbulent, which in turn is actually making people want guns. So
Right.
in one aspect, they're trying to get rid of something, and the other side, they're throwing gasoline on the fire and actually building it. Gun sales are going through the roof still. We have
Yes.
more and more women coming on board. How wonderful is that? And we've got more minorities. So it's a battle, and it's one that I think we can win. But as long as we pull together and don't put our tail between our legs and say we're defeated. Oh no, we're Americans. We're not going to be defeated like that.
Well, and this is just to give a little bit of hope too. This is the silver lining to all of this, what you were just talking about, Phil, because I've run into many people, some are on our staff, who now are very pro-gun, and they're constitutionalists and what we would call either conservative or libertarian, but they didn't start off that way. They started on the left, but it was the gun issue that kind of opened the window for them and started letting them breathe a little bit of freedom where they were concerned about their safety. But once you start taking your own safety into your own hands, then you start questioning whether government should be taking care of everything else in your life too. And
once you taste freedom, it opens up, doesn't it? Then you start looking around. Whoa! Look at all this stuff I wasn't even thinking about. I can have a lot more freedom and liberty and enjoy life more. And you're empowered. That's the thing too that the other side will never understand. That empowerment that comes with the first time you pull a trigger and you put a round through that bullseye, and you understand what that means overall. And you've got this empowerment, this freedom, this liberty. And those of that shoot know what that is, but so many Americans have no idea what they're missing.
You use that word empower, and like the story I just gave you was one of the gals who runs our women's outreach, and it's called Empowered 2A, and that's her story, that she started off as a lefty. She's the survivor of a sexual assault, and it really got her thinking in terms of how can I protect myself in the future. But it didn't stop there with just owning a firearm and learning how to use it. It's now transformed her into a full-fledged, constitutionalist. So this is the thing that the left, the anti-gun left, they're, in a sense, they're playing with fire, because you nailed it, Phil. As much turbulence as they cause, they're almost creating the backlash against them, where people now are going to be protecting their own selves. They'll be empowered. And it's like you said, once you get a taste of freedom, it's like, hey, this is pretty good.
Yeah, and that's what our academy is trying to do, to reach out to young adults in colleges and even high school, to get them to understand their liberties and freedom. They're not teaching civics really anymore. Somebody's got to tell them about the country they live in, about how the government works, and about their freedoms. And that's, it's a big job, and hopefully all of our members between your group and mine can be out there doing just that. But so I appreciate it. We're going to have John come on and talk about a few things, but we'll put your contact information up. Again, if you're not a member of GOA, you're making a severe mistake. You need to be a member of these guys. They're hard hitters. No fooling around in that group. They're getting the job done. And again, they've been wonderful partners with us.
Yeah,
we
I'm
absolutely enjoy working with you guys. Thanks so much. And I say you guys, but I'm a member too of VCDL. So yeah,
and I'm a GOA member.
I enjoy working
By the
with
way,
you.
I think Eric's a life member of VCDL, aren't you?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I know at least I'm a member. So a member for life for sure. And if
So
I'm
it's-
not, I need to fix that.
It's gunowners.org is your website.
Yes.
And I just put up a link here with their web address. And the link didn't show properly. I'll put a link down later to donate to the fund. But you can go to gunowners.org and donate to their litigation fund, which, by the way, I have to say, the lawsuit that VCDL has filed against the parks, the state gun control bill, and the lawsuit that VCDL has filed against the private sale background check, and the lawsuit that VCDL has filed against the one handgun a month, GOA has foot half the bill on those legal fees. So huge shout out for that. They've been walking step by step with VCDL since VCDL was formed. So great friends on the national level, and they help out in our state a lot. So give them a support there.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
Well,
guys.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah,
Great having
you're
you on. We'll
welcome.
have you on again.
Sounds
You're
great.
welcome
We'd
to
love
hang
to.
out with us, Eric. We've got John Pierce here, who is a firearms attorney, and he's going to tell us what we need to do before the end of the month if you have a braced pistol. So,
And we
Eric,
can't
you're welcome to
stop it.
hang out, or you can go back to your Mother's Day celebrations.
Which continues on downstairs. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.
Okay.
It's good seeing you, Eric.
Hey, take care, John. Good seeing
Thanks.
you.
So that's actually a pretty good lead-in. I've been sitting backstage listening to Eric and Phil and Pat talking about the administrative overreach of the ATF and Chevron deference, and how that there's some attempts to rein that in. I'm speaking with you today not as a board member of VCDL or even as a gun rights advocate, but as an attorney who does a lot of work with the ATF and who does a lot of gun trusts and who's helping people try and navigate these waters. So we're just going to go into it having already gotten rid of all the frustration with the administrative overreach that is going on, that has led us to being here. And I'm going to talk about where we are and the ways that you can comply legally within the current framework, and as well as some of the branching points where you have to make some decisions. So let's just go back quickly and talk about this. So back on January 13th, the Attorney General finally signed this rule that had been put out last year as a proposed rule. And there's a lot of complexity to it because they tried to thread the needle to not be overturned on this. And so there's this huge example document, etc. But the easiest way to think about it that'll get you 98% of the way there is this rule, which was published in the Federal Register on January 31st, and that's the date that it actually was promulgated, basically changes arm braces into butt stocks. So if you just look at your items that you have in the gun safe and you've got some AR pistols, etc., that have arm braces on them, and you just magically, those arm braces were changed into actual butt stocks, are those now SBRs? That's the question you have to ask yourself to determine whether or not, in fact, you need to comply. And in most cases, the answer is yes. And so, given that we have compliance requirements, and again, I'm talking as an attorney here, I know there's a lot of people who are talking about not complying and waiting on the courts to resolve this. You know, Eric was just telling us about some successes in the bump stock case. How many years did it take us to get there? And during that time, people were losing property, they were losing freedom, and I, as an attorney, cannot advise anyone to break the law. So I need to help people understand how they can comply in such a way that when we come out the other end of this, whether we're successful in litigating it or not, you, the owner of these items, will not be affected. So, going back to the rule that was passed, it passed on January 31st. They gave an amnesty period. That amnesty period expires on May 31st of this year. And basically, what they said is this: we made a mistake when we approved arm braces for sale. Retroactively, we're declaring them to be butt stocks. And by doing that, that means that all of these items that were previously allowed to be sold should not have been allowed to be sold without registration as an SBR. And so we're giving you a period of time in which you can register them to bring yourself into compliance. And if you do, then we are giving you this added benefit of, under certain circumstances, you can even get that tax stamp, which normally costs us $200 per item. Those of you that are involved in the NFA world, we're all very familiar with that amount of money that we write, that $200 check every time we get a new suppressor or build a new SBR or add a machine gun to the collection. They're doing away with that. Now, there's some quirks to that, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute, but basically, that is the big picture. And, you know, we've literally had, hundreds of my clients who have arm brace equipped items in their home, and we've gotten them through the process of applying for a tax stamp for those items. And I guess I should start here. Again, as an attorney, people call me up and say, what do you advise? Well, we had I believe it was a Bush-appointed judge in Texas who had the first swing at doing a preliminary injunction, and that judge declined to do so. So I don't believe for a minute we're going to get any injunctions prior to this, this rule going into effect. So everyone calls me up and says, what should I do? And here's the compliance options that you have legally under the rule. You can remove the arm brace and either destroy it, discard it, or move it somewhere that is separate from the premises where you store the item that it will fit on. And there's a little bit of complexity to that might allow you to keep it in the house. It's all goes back to the patholegality analysis from the Thompson Contender case. You know, if you have a full-length rifle that could also accept the arm brace, you might be able to simply remove it from the pistol and keep it in the home. But in general, if you don't have something else where it could fit legally, you can still keep it. It's only an accessory. They say this multiple times in the rule as well as in the FAQ that they put out. Arm braces are just like buttstocks. You can go into Sportsman's Warehouse and buy an arm brace. A buttstock off the wall and take it home. It's just an accessory. There's no background check. But having one of those in a home where the only gun it will fit is a pistol is constructive possession of an SBR. And that's the same place that you're going to end up. So if you decide you want to keep them, you're going to want to store them somewhere where they cannot be considered constructive possession of an SBR, even though you physically remove them from the pistol. So that's number one way to comply, is simply remove the characteristic, the arm brace, and wait until there is a final resolution and then decide what to do. The other option is to go ahead and take the free tax stamp. And there's a lot of arguments to be made for taking the free tax stamp. It is a free tax stamp. Most of us SBR stuff quite frequently, and we're writing those checks anyway. And here you're getting it for free. There are a few little quirks I want to talk about a little bit later on. But in general, it's just a free tax stamp. And most of us have already been in the NFRTR, the registry, where these items get entered for a long time for our collections. And this would just be one more. If you are going to take them up on the free registry, though, there is one quirk that came out early on, and that is most of us, and it should be all of us, but most of us own our NFA items in trusts. And so the ATF said, well, this rule said whoever owned the item on January 31st, which was the date the rule went into effect, whoever owned the item then is the only one that's entitled to the free transfer. Anyone else who acquired it since then needs to pay $200 to register it if they're going to turn it into an SBR. And so a lot of people are asking the question, well, I want to put it in my trust. So the first question is, did your trust exist before January 31st? That's the number one question. If it didn't, then it's a moot point. You're going to have to pay the $200 if you want to register it in your trust. Otherwise, you're limited taking the free stamp in your name individually with all the disadvantages that come with individual ownership of NFA items. And again, I know I have a dog in this hunt, but I highly recommend that no one own an NFA item individually. The benefits of having them in a trust or some other non-individual ownership is much higher. But anyway, if you did have your trust prior to January 31st, that's not the end of the inquiry. Then it comes down to, had the items been assigned to the trust prior to January 31st? And I have an article on that I encourage everyone to go read. My website is johnpierceesq.com. And Pat, if you would put that out so people can have that link, that would be great. And on the main page, if you're looking at it on a computer, not on a mobile device, but on the main page, there's an image at the top, there's a menu bar, and right underneath there's a section called Getting Up to Speed on the arm brace rule. And I have a number of articles there that I think everyone should read who is going to be affected by this. But one of them has a little flashing exclamation mark beside of it, and it's called Documenting the Date That I Assigned My Arm Brace Equipped Items into My Trust. And it talks there about this requirement. It talks about, under Virginia law, what are the various ways that you can assign items to a trust, and how would you go about preparing the document that has to be uploaded when you do the free tax stamp showing that the item was owned at the time that the rule went into effect on January 31st. And anyone who's planning on doing this after hearing this should definitely read that article before they call me or whatever attorney did their trust to talk about this. And some other little quirks are, number one, the arm brace rule affects not only AR pistols, but also shotguns that have arm braces on them. But interestingly enough, the free tax stamp does not apply to them, but the change in characteristic does apply to them. So again, in that section on my website, I've got a link to the ATF FAQ. I also have a link to their example document that they put out, where they list a not comprehensive but a pretty extensive list of all the different models that are affected, because they'd originally started out in their proposed rule with this long list of criteria, and they tried to narrow that down, and they tried to sort of replace it with an examples document. And if you have something with an arm brace on it, you should definitely take a look through there and see. You don't want to get caught on the wrong end of this. Now, if you do submit the registration, whether it's individually or in the name of your trust, and you're going to do it through the e-form system, they've got a special system set up there to do the free ones. And at the end of that, just like with a regular Form 1 submission, you get an emailed copy of the Form 1 that was submitted with submitted written across it. And per the terms of this rule, once you get that submitted document proving that you submitted your application before the amnesty period ended on May 31st, then you can continue using your arm brace equipped item while waiting on the approval. They also said, and this is not written in the rule, but they said this multiple times during some various seminars that we had with the ATF after this was announced. They did some compliance webinars for the legal community and for anyone who wanted to attend. They said multiple times that those that had correctable errors in their Form 1s would be allowed to resubmit them as well, as opposed to just being denied. So that's where that is. The other little quirk I wanted to mention is when these are approved, they're being approved with conditions. Those of you that already have some tax stamps will know down at the bottom where it says approved, one of the options is approved with conditions. And then you go to the last page and they tell you what the conditions are. And those conditions say, pursuant to this rule. And they give the rule number. And the reason that's important is if you get this free tax stamp. So I've got my AR pistol. It has an arm brace on it. I go ahead and I take the free tax stamp. And I continue using it with the arm brace until I get the approval. At that point, I'm like, okay, fine. I wanted an arm brace. I'm a buttstock anyway. I get an actual comfortable buttstock and put on there. And I'm using it as an SBR because that's what you get. You get a full SBR tax stamp. But because this is approved conditional to this rule, you need to keep your eyes on the courts, because if the Fourth Circuit or the Supreme Court ever decides that this rule was erroneously passed and backs it up, all of a sudden you need to get that buttstock off there, put an arm brace back on it, because you no longer have a valid tax stamp. So that's the other thing you need to look for. So I've rambled a lot here to try and get sort of the framework put out there that we can talk about. So let me look and see if there have been any questions as I've been talking.
Yeah, well, while you're looking, I have a few things. Just some notes. Again, I think one of the points that you went over that I think is key is that if you have a regular AR-15 rifle or carbine, it's a 16-inch barrel or longer, and you have this buttstock that is not not buttstock. Well, they're calling it buttstock. This arm brace that is not on any of your pistols, but you do have that AR-15 rifle, that you're probably not going to be viewed as being in constructive possession, because that particular buttstock can be put on your AR-15 if you want one that's a little more collapsed than a regular AR-15.
That's the Thompson contender case. It's called the Pathway to Legality Analysis. And basically it says if you have an accessory in the house that would turn one gun into an illegal gun, but it could be used legally on any other gun that you have, then we will assume that you bought it that you have it for a legal purpose. If you have no pathway to legality, then they will make the assumption that you're in constructive possession of an illegal SBR.
Okay, so a lot of our members probably do have an AR-15. I know I've got a couple pistols, but I've also got an AR-15. I imagine most of us do, but that's something to keep in mind, that would greatly help. The other thing I was going to... Go ahead, John.
Just to finish that before you move to the next point, it has to be an AR-15 that arm brace would fit on as it's sitting there. In other words, some of these, the buffer tube on the AR-15 has détentes that it can fit on. And then, so the AR-15 that you're going to want to use as your pathway to legality would also have to have the détentes necessary for it to go on to.
Well, you're talking about in the actual tube, the little notches in the tube. Well,
Yeah.
but if that whole thing, the notch, the tube, and the brace are not on the rifle yet, what you do is you would take off the other tube, put this tube on, and if you wanted to put the brace on.
I think if you had a pistol that had the notch tube,
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, good. That's what I was going to say. If you had the tube off and the arm
Yes.
brace off, then yes, absolutely that would pass. But if you had the notch tube on the pistol but not one on the rifle, that would be a problem.
That'd be a problem. Agreed. What I did was I took off the tube and the arm brace, and I got a regular tube for it. But this one came with some padding around the outside of the tube, some foam that you could put against your cheek. It didn't extend the tube back at all. Doesn't really do anything for the tube. There's no way you could really shoulder it in any logical way, but you can put it against your cheek, giving another place to weld the pistol to. That should be fine, right? That is not a shoulder fired thing.
We asked the ATF about that, and their answer was foam padding is fine. It is first of all, the tube that's on there needs to be integral to the functioning of the firearm, which it certainly is in the AR design. And number two, it can't add additional surface area that has no other function other than to allow it to be shouldered.
Right.
So foam tube is fine. Again, what we were seeing manufacturers that were making some really neat arm brace designs, and they were arm brace, fully functional as an arm brace, but they looked a lot, everyone was trying to see how close to the look of a buttstock they could get. We all build our collection because we like the way things look as well as the functionality. And so basically, if somebody were to build a buffer tube, and the buffer tube ran straight out just like a normal buffer tube and then flared up into this V-shaped thing at the end, that would be a problem.
That'd be a problem.
That surface area not necessary to the functioning, and it would allow shouldering, whereas just the foam covering is not a problem. That was.
And I find that foam works pretty well against the cheek. I mean, I can really hit things quite easily at 50 yards with that, giving me that extra point of contact. And I've got a strap on it so that I can also, adjust that and get it really tight. When I push it out, I've got it locked in. The other thing I was going to point out, John, you were saying, of course, they can get this free tax stamp making it an SBR, and then maybe you could even put a foregrip on it and all the stuff you could do with an SBR. But I will point out this to our members. One reason I'm thinking I'm not going to do this personally. Number one, if it's a pistol and you keep as a pistol and get the foam thing, or just go with holding it like that, it's a pistol. That means it is covered by your concealed carry permit, unlike an SBR. SBR isn't covered under your concealed carry. You'd have to make sure it's always visible. While a pistol could be concealed, like in your vehicle, you could put something over it or put it under something. That's all fine and dandy. If you cross out of the state into another state, you don't have to get ATF's permission or notify them that you're taking your SBR across state lines because you just got a pistol. You can take that across state lines. You can't in a lot of places in Virginia while you're driving, you can't have a loaded rifle in the car, which means no loaded SBRs in a lot of cases, but you can have a loaded pistol everywhere. And so there's there's advantages to each, and
Oh,
I kind of like the
absolutely.
pistol.
And I think most people are keeping at least one of their AR pistols as a pistol, specifically for that reason. I mean, the AR pistol is, especially if you have the strap adjusted properly so you can do push balancing against it. That really works well. But anyway, yeah, the trick is for people to get things in by March 31st. And I'm reading one of the questions.
May 31st.
Yeah, May 31st. Sorry. Someone says, what about the Form 1 180-day automatic disapproval? There's a lot of misinformation about that. And it's not that there isn't a 180-day automatic disapproval, but it's 180-day between the time that the ATF actually finishes working it up in their system, transmits it to the FBI, and is awaiting a background check. So it's not 180 days from the day you apply. It's 108. So when you mail it in, when you send it in, whether you're doing e-forms, etc., out in Oregon, they take the money, they deposit it immediately, then it goes on to Martinsburg. It ends up in an examiner's either electronic queue or actually on their desk if it's paper. And eventually they work through their queue until they get to yours. They enter it into their processing queue, make sure everything matches, make sure they don't need to send out any correction letters, etc. At that point, then, it's all entered. They hit the button that says send it to the FBI. The FBI, who since July 13th of 2016 has been doing the background checks for NFA items without the proper manpower because the Obama administration moved it to them without giving them adequate manpower and funding for that. They then have this huge backlog of background checks. And ultimately, if it requires any investigation at all, then it gets stretched out. If it sits in that status for more than 180 days, yes, there's an automatic disapproval. It's called an open disposition disapproval. And that is going to happen to some people. It happens to people every day for non-amnesty ones. And in the event that somebody gets one of those on one of these amnesty items, my advice to them is, all right, take off the buttstock, take off the arm brace immediately, get it out of your home, and we'll address what to do from there. But at least stop it being an item. And then the other question is, how can you submit a Form 1 without incriminating yourself, since you shouldn't have possession of it anyway? The rule does, in fact, allow for you, once you have a submitted Form 1 application submitted prior to the amnesty date, it does provide for continued possession and use of the item while waiting on the approval.
So, John, I have a question. Is there a way to file a paper Form 1 as opposed to the online amnesty form? And the reason that I ask this is because if you make an error on a paper form, they will send it back to you for correction. But if you make an error on an online submission, they just deny it. So that would preclude you from maybe taking advantage of the amnesty if you, say, spelled your name wrong or something like that. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct, and you're not the first person to bring that up. I will say, and again, this is not in the rule itself, so we only have the word of the people who were handling these public outreach sessions when the rule first passed. But the ATF did say that in those events that if someone had simply made some clerical error and it got denied because of that, they would allow the person to put a comment in the train stop when you come back through the application again that they were denied previously because of a clerical error, and ask for it to still be processed under the amnesty, and they would do so. That is what was said. Again, as an attorney, I don't have any portion of the rule that I can point to that says that they're required to do that, because it's not in there.
And Diego is asking, what if you put a brace on a rifle and now you have a buttstock laying around, presumably that you took off the rifle? Would they try to say that you were planning to put the stock on the pistol?
No, you can have as many backups as you want. So, for example, I have some rifles. I've got buttstock. I've got extra buttstocks for my rifles. I've got an AR pistol. That's not constructive possession because there's a path to legality there. That buttstock can be a backup for one of my rifles that can legally accept it. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, so what else do people need to know here?
I really think that that's the largest part of it, is you need to comply in some way by May 31st, whether that's submitting an amnesty registration or just removing the arm brace from the item and getting it, you can destroy, discard, give away, or just move it to somewhere else like your office until such time as we get a court ruling on this. Those are all valid options, but don't just put your head in the sand. You need to be prepared for this. I don't anticipate this is the kind of thing. We're seeing home visits by the ATF over forced reset triggers. I mean, people are getting visits in their home actively. I get calls about that every week. I don't anticipate this is going to be one of those. This is going to be more like the bump stock thing. There's so many of these out there, there'd be no way for them to do it. They're going to pick off people as they make mistakes. And so don't be one of those people that makes a mistake. Even if you're absolutely insistent that you're not going to comply, then get the arm brace off there, put it somewhere where it isn't around your gun, and wait. And, there's multiple challenges that have been filed, and we'll be hoping for a successful outcome, but it will probably be several years before we get to a point where we'll really know where those are going.
Okay.
And again, one more time to emphasize what you're saying there is, again, for those of you that the arm brace included a buffer tube. That buffer tube may have little notches in it, so that the arm brace could be adjusted a little bit. Get that buffer tube off there and put a plain, proper length buffer tube back on your pistol.
So let me actually clarify that. You can leave the buffer tube on there that has those positions if you're going to get rid of the arm brace out of your house. If you're going to keep it in your house and you're going to do the path to legality thing, make sure your rifle also has one of those detente ones, or switch them out. One of those two things. But that's you don't have to take it off if you're getting the arm brace completely away, or the other gun also has it. But if the other gun doesn't have it, then yes, you would want to take it off. I know that's a fine point, but I don't want to confuse people.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also a point that we need to make here is that if you choose to register your pistol as a short-barreled rifle and you're doing it under the amnesty, that is an individual registration. So your spouse cannot have that item or have access to that item when you're not there. If it's in the safe and your spouse has the combination to the safe and you're not there, then you are both committing a felony. You can't loan it to your buddy to take out to the range or to shoot without you being there with the gun. So there's other restrictions that you have to keep in mind. It falls under all the same restrictions as any other NFA item that is owned by an individual and not a trust.
The use of a trust will mitigate that somewhat, but if you register it individually, that's one of the huge disadvantages. You're basically the only human being that can touch it, except for a licensed gunsmith, until you die.
Well, somebody else can touch it if you're standing right there with them and have control over it.
Well, actually, not as an individual registrant. We've had several cases, and of course, like so much bad law, the cases involve drug convictions. So, but we have case law that says that even if you're right there in control of it, an individually registered item is illegally transferred if someone else can also touch it. And so that's why the trusts have become so, ubiquitous with ownership. Because with a trust, if you're standing beside someone, then anyone can, and they're not a prohibited person, then anyone can shoot it because you're still there and able to control. And then you can also name people as responsible persons on the trust, and they can actually take the item and go off on their own with it and share it with other people equally. And again, that's why no one should ever own these items individually, because, and it isn't like the ATF is roaming around ranges actively looking for that as far as, the within arm's reach of each other, but that is, we do have case law that it's pretty scary, and as I said, it always comes from drug cases where they whittle away at our rights.
or
So
any kind of crime.
if somebody does register it as the SBR under this amnesty period and it's an individual, they can then at some point later file a Form 4 and transfer it to a trust and pay the $200 tax.
They can.
Or they can write the ATF and say, this is no longer an SBR. I am taking the stock off. I am turning it into a pistol, and I want to deregister it.
And you can actually do that off and on. So not the writing a letter to the ATF, but let's say I've got one of my SBRs in here, and I want to go, somebody invites me to go to the range in Kentucky next week, and I don't have time to get an approved Form 20, I can go in there and take my buttstock off, and then I have removed the characteristic that brings that pistol within the purview of the NFA. Poof, it's now just a pistol again, and I can take it to Kentucky. I just can't take the buttstock with it. So you can actually go back and forth on those by removing and then re-adding the characteristic. But when you write the letter to the ATF surrendering the stamp, you've surrendered it forever. But you can temporarily remove the characteristic at any time.
Yeah, so for example, you could keep your 16-inch upper and slam that on there and leave the buttstock on or the arm brace and cross the line, because now you've got a rifle. Because a pistol can be converted to a rifle, but a gun that saw birth as a rifle can't be converted to a pistol. But we're talking pistols here, so you should be able to convert it to a rifle.
Well, yeah, and that's a rule that people should get built into their heads, especially people who build out lowers. The rule is once a rifle, always a rifle, unless you started life as a pistol. So if it started out as a pistol, you can go back and forth all you want. But if it started life as a stripped receiver, once you've made it into a rifle once, it can never go back to a pistol. Now, a lot of that is like, how would they know that? But I'm just saying, it depends on what kind of Form 2 was filed when it was manufactured. So, if you're going to do this, and I'm a big fan of taking advantage of that option to remove the characteristic if you just want to treat it as a pistol. Always start off with an item that was manufactured as an AR pistol, and then add your SBR characteristics and register.
But if you just bought the frame, the lower, bought a stripped lower, you populated it. And the first thing you did was make that a pistol. You put a pistol on there. Is that now?
No, because it didn't start life as a pistol. It started life as a stripped lower. There are three ways that items can, there's shotguns and other things, but for what we're talking here, you can start life as a pistol. The manufacturer sent in the Form 2, I made a pistol today. They send in a Form 2, I made a rifle today. Or they send in a Form 2, I made a lower today. If it didn't start life as a pistol, once it hits rifle, it's stuck. But if it started life as a pistol, you can go back and forth all you want.
So once you get it, if you build a pistol out of it, then it's a pistol. You just can't ever make it into a rifle. You can keep it as a pistol.
You can make it into a rifle.
But then you can't go back. You can't go back. If you want to do it to a rifle, it's like a permanent thing. It's legally at that point.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, I hope
stupid.
that helped, and I think Pat put up my website And so, anyone who has one of my trusts or who has some questions, certainly give me a call. The next few weeks are going to be very busy, helping people get their Form 1s submitted and reviewing all their documents to make sure they don't have any problems. But feel free to call, and I will get back in touch with everyone that I can as quickly as I can. And thank you so much for having me on. I am going to have to step away for a family commitment, as Eric had. But if anyone thinks of any other questions, they can email me or reach out, and I'll do my best to answer them all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I think we're about wrapped.
we really appreciate you coming on, John. It was very informative.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's too bad it's so complicated, and too bad that all this gun control is all BS, all of it. That's a shame.
Yeah.
And that's why I started this whole conversation by saying that I was talking tonight as an attorney, not as an advocate, because the real comment as an advocate is none of this passes the historical analysis under Bruin.
Right.
And we
But
all
who
know
wants to
that,
go to
but-
jail? Well, that goes to court.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my job is as an attorney, is to protect people from the law.
Right.
So-
And our job as an organization is we don't want to get our members in any kind of trouble. We try to be very careful not to guide anybody where they could get in trouble as best we can. I don't want that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you all very
Thank you.
much, and you have a great night.
You too,
Yep,
John.
take care, John. And
Thank
by
you.
the way, John does NFA Trust for $100. So if you need an NFA Trust done, look him up. Absolutely.
And if you have a friend who perhaps lost their gun rights when they were younger because they made a silly mistake, or because maybe they got mental health treatment and they're better now, I practice statewide, so feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Tell Janine Happy Mother's Day.
Yes.
Thanks, I will. You do the same, Philip.
Okay.
And then
Good
Pat, happy Mother's Day.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. We went to the range today, had a steak dinner. My son brought me flowers. It was a great day.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, it's good
Good night,
talking to you
John.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Bye.
So CT is asking, what if the strip lower starts as an other? A strip
That's
lower
what he was
is an
addressing.
other. Yeah. So let's see. We also had a question that I wanted to touch on real quick before we jump off of here. Tactic or memes has been asking about the rally that we had in Richmond, and we need to do another one. There were a couple of people, I think, talking about that. Let me find the questions. So one of them was saying, can we have it like in warmer weather? No, the reason is that we hold it in January because that's when the General Assembly session is starting. So, yeah, here's the original post that I was going to put up. So the General Assembly starts in early January, and we hold Lobby Day in January on Martin Luther King Day, which is the third Monday in January.
Right.
Because the session is just starting, bills are being assigned to committees, and it's a holiday that they are working, but a lot of people are off of work. So unless you can convince the General Assembly to change their schedule, it's always going to be on the third Thursday of January. So go ahead and mark your calendars now to take off for Lobby Day. As far as having the 80,000 people showing up, that depends on you guys. We would love to see 80,000 people there every year. We've been doing Lobby Day for 20 years now?
More than that.
And some years we have a lot more people than others. Obviously, 2020 people got really engaged, but it just depends on you guys showing up. And the more people that show up, the more leverage we have during the session. And yes, they went ahead and crammed those bills through anyway, but it would have been, I
Much worse.
guarantee you, it would have been a lot worse. We would
Oh,
be
yeah.
under that terrible assault weapons ban that was proposed in 2020 if you guys hadn't shown up like you did.
Yeah,
I guarantee it.
the gun controllers had complete control. They could have done anything they wanted, and passed the worst possible assault weapon ban imaginable. Couldn't have been stopped. But because of that turnout, that bill died immediately. Man, they couldn't get rid of it quick enough. Now, what Tactical Means is saying is, he's talking about DC. Well, we don't do stuff with DC. We're strictly in Richmond. So it'd be one of the national groups if they were doing some national thing that would organize for the DC area.
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
strictly Virginia.
Now, Philip has spoken at some of the gun rallies. I think you spoke at one up in DC a couple of
Mhm.
years ago, did you not?
Yeah, I have.
So he does speak at rallies that other people put on, but as far as VCDL actually organizing a rally or something like Lobby Day, we are a Virginia gun rights organization, and we focus 100% of our attention and 100% of our money, that your membership dues and your contributions, 100% of that goes to fighting for gun rights in Virginia. So unlike some other national organizations where you donate money or you pay your membership dues, it may go to Virginia, it may go to Oregon, it may go to New Jersey, may go to Florida. With VCDL, you know that 100% of those funds are right here in Virginia. Now, we did participate in the bump stock case with GOA. We helped fund some of that, but that was because it affected Virginians, because we knew that that law would facilitate things like this pistol brace ban and other things that affect everybody here in a negative way. So, we pick our battles, but we fight the Virginia fight. So, and yeah, the question is, how do we get 80,000 people again? You have to talk to your friends and neighbors, tell them why they need to be engaged in preserving and restoring the right to keep and bear
Yeah,
arms.
yeah. What happened in 2019 was grassroots, which is what we are. Um,
Mhm.
but it was people. Not only we told our members about all this Second Amendment sanctuary thing. That's where it started. That really got the fire going. By the time the General Assembly started in January 2020, so we had over 50,000 people showing up. But it started, it was grassroots. It was people going to their gun clubs and saying, we've got to go to the county and we've got to demand that they become a Second Amendment sanctuary. It was people going to gun stores and talking to people there, posting things about it. It was grassroots. It was an incredible example of grassroots and the power that all of you have in your hands if you we get as many people going as we did then. There's nothing we couldn't accomplish. It was truly beautiful grassroots. But getting that fire started every time, what it took to get it going last time was our governor back then, Northam, saying, well, we're thinking about confiscating ARs. We haven't decided, but we're thinking about it. Well, that spread and that spread and that spread, and the media was spreading it. Well, that lit the grassroots because so many people were sleeping. They would still have been sleeping if that hadn't hit their radar. And then they woke up and then they were panicked, started spreading the word and created this incredible movement. But the question is, how do we wake all those people up again when they like sleeping and they don't realize that their liberties are constantly at risk and you cannot be sleeping. So
Well,
that's the
I tell
problem.
you what, we need everybody awake right now, because this is an off election year as far as presidential elections goes, but as far as Virginia elections goes, it is huge. The entire General Assembly is up for re-election. So we could see another 2019 where the control goes back to the anti-gun administrations, or we can see a resurgence of freedom where the balance of power shifts to a pro gun majority in both the House and the Senate. if we have the pro-gun majority put into the General Assembly, then our 2024 legislative session could be the absolute reverse of what happened in 2020. And that's what we need to see. We
And that's what
could
we'll push
totally,
for. I mean,
right, repeal the one handgun a month, repeal the private sale background check,
local gun control.
repeal local gun control, and even strengthen it more. We could even see constitutional carry.
Yes, we could. We could, as a matter of
So,
fact. That's,
and by the way, we get questions all the time. When is VCDL going to introduce a bill for constitutional carry? We've had one in for the last 8, 9, 10
I
years,
don't know.
maybe.
It's been a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Initially, it was hard getting it through by the Republicans were busy killing it. Then they got over that, and then we ended up with Democrats in control. But the stars could be aligning if we all get out and vote and turn things around. This may be the time to get a lot of things done that we've been unable to do before. We need the pro-gun people. If we get that election to go the way we want, we need all those pro-gun people to do for us what the gun control Democrats did for the gun control groups back in 2020. We need the reverse of that, and no excuses.
In June 20th, a lot of localities have a primary election, and that's where you pick the people that are worth voting for in November. So look at your local elections and see who's running for office. Call them up and talk to them. If they don't have time to talk to you when they're running for office, they're sure not going to have time to talk to you once they get elected. So call them up. If there's people in your locality or your neighboring locality that are really good people, go work for their campaigns, knock on doors, talk to people and tell them why they need to vote for their gun rights first.
And calling them is a great thing because that's a reminder. If you guys keep doing that, everybody out there starts calling, telling their friends to call and all that to these candidates, that's going to just underline that gun rights is a major issue in this state, and we got to do something about it. Not flap our lips, but get something done in 2024. And that will get their attention. If you don't bother calling them, they go, well, we're good on guns. I'm not really hearing a lot of interest. No, we need to show them there's tons of interest out there, and we're sick and tired of what's been going on for the last 3 years. We're tired of it. It's time to fix it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. We are way over time here, but I think
it was a good session.
Meeting. Yeah,
a
lot of information tonight. Some of you jumped in late, some of you jumped out early. So listen in your commute. Don't watch, obviously, but listen while you're driving to work and share it with your friends. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate your support.
And is it this Thursday coming up? This Thursday is going to be the meeting up in Northern Virginia? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay, so
XCal. Yeah, it is this coming Thursday, the 18th. Let me see if I got the banner here that I can put up. I don't have a banner handy, but it'll come out in a VA alert. XCal Shooting Range and Fitness in Ashburn, Virginia. So if you're up in that area, stop in and see us. We meet at 8 o'clock. Come early and bust a cap or grab a snack at their snack bar. Beautiful facility and wonderful people. So,
yep. And we'll see you there.
Guys.
Good night.
Have a good night. We'll see you on the next one.